who was a secretary for the US Air Force. She also saw the ordnance card and confirmed that it was real. And there were also still shots taken from Madeline Rodeffer's home. Sorry, there was a film of a UFO that was photographed at Madeline Rodeffer's home in 1965. And she says that she was actually present when she says extraterrestrials, according to Adamski, very handsome looking young men, arrived at her home and said, "Get the cameras ready, a craft's going to appear shortly," and actually was with her and Adamski when Adamski filmed this UFO flying there with her camera. So, why would she lie? She's a direct witness. I mean, direct witnesses, goodness, these are used in court cases all around the country. And she is a very credible person. Why is she? Why is her testimony dismissed? Why would the testimony of William Sherwood be dismissed about Adamski having these ordnance cards? So, there's much more to be said about the Adamski case, but I just want to say for now that I think it's a very important part of the puzzle concerning what happened to Kennedy, what Kennedy knew, and what eventually got him killed. So now I want to come to the most important part, the third phase, and this is the thing that I think finally tipped the scales and led to the confrontation with Majestic 12. So President Kennedy, there's a photo there, a still shot of President Kennedy at the United Nations on September 20, where he's proposing joint space and lunar missions with the USSR. But first, it's just good to be reminded that Kennedy is very aware of his lack of access to UFO files from the CIA and Majestic 12. In June of 1963, Kennedy is flying to Berlin to deliver his famous speech, proclaiming "I'm a hamburger" in German, I think it was, the literal translation, but "I'm a Berliner" in English. On board Air Force One is a military man who relates the following. Quote, this is according to Dr. Stephen Greer. Kennedy on the long flight at one point began discussing the UFO matter with this military officer. He admitted that he knew the UFOs were real, had seen the evidence, but then astonished the officer by stating, "The whole matter is out of my hands, I don't know why." Kennedy said he wanted the truth to come out, but that he couldn't do it, end quote. So here you are in June of 1963, Kennedy revealing to a senior, a lieutenant colonel, that's a fairly senior Air Force officer, that UFOs are real, there are files on them, but he's denied access. And this was a problem for Kennedy. So it shows you that the Kennedy was very concerned about this, even as late as June of '63. So what was Kennedy's final strategy? And I think this was what he did. He basically came up with an initiative to have to share information with the Soviet Union on joint space and lunar missions. So on September 20, 1963, Kennedy said in a speech at the United Nations General Assembly, quote, "Finally, in a field where the United States and the Soviet Union have a special capacity in the field of space, there is room for new cooperation for further joint efforts in the regulation and exploration of space. I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon." How many of you here knew that in September 1963, President Kennedy was proposing joint lunar and space operations with the Soviet Union? How many people knew? Okay, it's good to look around because, keep your hands up, those who knew. Look around. Probably a quarter. This is important historical information. Why isn't it more widely known? I think there are those that didn't want this to be widely known. What were the reactions to Kennedy's his joint space lunar cooperation with the USSR speech? Well, the United Nations, that was thunderous applause. They were stunned. People around the world were really excited by this. What was the response in the United States and the Soviet Union? Very lukewarm response by Congress and NASA. Prospects of space cooperation with the USSR, bordered on treason. The idea of sharing your most sensitive files, the pearls of your military industrial efforts with the enemy, that bordered on treason. Many viewed this as almost treason. So there was very little support in the US Congress for this. And what about the Soviet Union? Well, at least the Soviet Union would be supportive, right? I mean, why take the risk? If you're going to get your Congress upset, at least you have the Soviet Union being excited, right? Public response by the Soviet Union? Silence. Nothing. Privately, what's Khrushchev saying? Khrushchev privately refused. Didn't want to have anything to do with it. Didn't want to share the Soviet secret with the USSR. So nevertheless, Kennedy continues to reach out to Khrushchev in the USSR to accept his offer. Why? Why would Kennedy do it? Why, piss off your constituency, Congress, even people in the military, commander-in-chief, they'd look at you and say, this is almost treason, right? NASA aren't supportive. The Soviet Union isn't interested. So why are you doing this? There has to be a subplot. What's the subplot? What's the agenda here? The agenda is what I've been saying. Kennedy needed to get control. He knew that this was the only way he could get control finally. He's been in office for his third year. He's tried everything to try and get access to the UFO files, been denied access by the CIA, Majestic 12. He's been visiting classified military facilities to try and gain access. He's had some success, but eventually runs into a brick wall. He can't get control. He tells all to a lieutenant colonel on Air Force One. He doesn't have control. He's trying to get access. So what's his final strategy? This is it. This is the big one. Joint cooperation with the USSR on joint space missions. And he needs the cooperation of the USSR to do it. A very bold initiative. The USSR initially says no, but then there's an about face. On November 11, 1963, Khrushchev, according to Khrushchev's son, Sergei, accepted Kennedy's offer. November 11, Kennedy's assassinated November 22nd. Keep that in mind. 11 days later, he's assassinated. So, Khrushchev accepts. What's Kennedy do? Okay, things begin to happen. November 12th, the next day, Kennedy issues a memorandum. National Security Action Memorandum number 271 on November 12, 1963. The subject header was Cooperation with the USSR on Outer Space Matters and addressed to the NASA Administrator. Quote, I would like you to assume personally the initiative and central responsibility within the government for the development of a program of substantive cooperation with the Soviet Union in the field of outer space, including the development of specific technical proposals. So this is basically a very bold memorandum saying cooperation is going to be happening. I want you to share all the information that's going to make this level of cooperation possible. And this is a genuine document, NSA M271 has been released, and that's an authentic government document. So that the NASA administrator was given those instructions by Kennedy on November 12, 10 days before the assassination. Another memo, a top secret memo. That earlier memo was confidential. It was eventually released under Freedom of Information. That was a confidential memo. This one is a top secret memo to the CIA director, John McCone at the time. On the same day, November 12, Kennedy issued a top secret memorandum to the director, and the subject header was Classification Review of All Intelligence Files Affecting National Security. The top secret memorandum went on to say, quote, I've instructed James Webb, the NASA administrator, to develop a program with the Soviet Union in joint space and lunar explorations. It would be very helpful if you would have the high threat UFO cases reviewed with the purpose of identification of bona fides as opposed to classified CIA and US Air Force files. When this data has been sorted out, I would like you to arrange a program of data sharing with NASA where unknowns UFOs are a factor. This will help NASA missions directors in their defensive responsibilities. I would like an interim report on the data review no later than February 1st, 1964. Well, this was the thing that really kind of set off the alarm bells. This was the thing that caused chaos. Because, imagine, UFO classified files are all held in, they're controlled by CIA counterintelligence. You have the military intelligence community also with some control of these files. But Majestic 12, it's basically working through CIA counterintelligence. Increasingly, all of these files are put under this repository of CIA counterintelligence. If you have these files shared with NASA, That means NASA